What's going on YouTube? Listen up, young elder gang. This is Shoeshine Joe at you, with another banger. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video, fam. I hope this video get at least 100,000 likes. In this video you will find history definitions, scripture information, and best of all, what we Americans have been deprived of from the beginning. The truth, keep in mind. This content used in this video is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. We will give you the total truth as we best understand it today. Be sure to hit that like button. Young Elder Gang, hit that subscribe button. If you're new to the channel, hit that bell, and don't forget to check back with us every day for new content. If your dinner looks normal but sounds like a lab report, congrats, you're eating franken food. Think that's a joke? Fugged about it. Genetically modified food is everywhere. No labels, no warnings. Big companies play God, and we're the guinea pigs. Allergies, weird sickness, even cancer, they ain't making this up. Read labels, ask questions, or just eat what they feed the rats. Stay sharp out there. There is a lot of talk these days about being prepared for natural and man-made disasters. Finding classes, lectures, videos, and books on how to be self-sufficient is as simple as a click of the mouse. Some people even scoff at preppers, saying they are overly paranoid. However, if you consider the staggering number of deep earth bunkers that have been constructed for the military and super elite, and those still under construction, you might think twice about becoming a prepper yourself. Just the idea of it should make the rational mind wonder. If the gendarme branches and their upper-class handlers are so fixated with survival bunkers fortified with everything needed to live comfortably for 50, 75 years, maybe things really is about to hit the fan. Indeed, how can anyone sit back in comfort after witnessing the massive disasters that unfolded during Hurricanes Katrina, Harvey, and Irma? What of the 2017 California wildfires, the massive earthquakes in Mexico, or the eruption of Hawaii's Kilauea volcano? Among the myriads of man-made worldwide disasters that many of us see coming down the road, there is one of epic proportions that is currently underway, yet too few have yet to recognize it. By now, the entire world population has heard of GMOs or genetically modified organisms, but apparently, not everyone understands exactly what these are or what they mean to the average person. The World Health Organization describes them as organisms in which the genetic material, DNA, has been altered in a way that does not occur naturally. The M technology is referred to as modern biotechnology, gene technology, recombinant DNA technology, or just plain old genetic engineering. Whatever you want to call it, genetic manipulation allows selected genes to be taken from one organism and forced into another. It is important to realize that the genes used to develop GMO plants and food crops can and often do belong to any number of living organisms, including unrelated plants, animals, insects, bacteria, viruses, fungi, and even human genes. People who have a deep and abiding faith in a creator god of any kind should be especially horrified at this island of Dr. Moreau experiment on the human population. If God had intended rice and mice to splice, mad scientists wouldn't have to force DNA from one species into another using viruses as a vector. It would happen naturally. While I certainly don't intend to eat any mice in the near future, nearly half of the world's population relies on rice as a staple food source. Until there is a real law that requires the listing of GMO ingredients, we cannot trust that the food we buy in the grocery stores aren't made with a mutant strain of monkey virus or worse. There are very real concerns as to how genetically modified foods act upon the human and animal body. Not only were the big biotech companies allowed free rein to play God with our food, but they also got to carry out and present their own research to the FDA and USDA to prove that GMO foods and their associated herbicides and pesticides were safe for human consumption. The big six franken food purveyors are BASF, Bayer, DuPont, Dow Chemical Company, Monsanto, and Syngenta. The wolf in sheep's clothing is guarding the pasture, and if you want to eat or farm or sell seed, you had better get on board or be prepared to be lied to, coerced, or run out of business. The powerful lobby of these chemical companies, who brought the world delights such as Agent Orange and DDT, are granted all manner of privileges by cowardly government officials who don't dare confront them. Among the many free passes given to these almighty chemical companies include the acceptance of laughable in-house research studies that are clearly manipulated either by their own lackey scientists or by bought-off labs and universities to raise little, if any, cause for alarm. In fact, long before the FDA was kowtowed by the powerful hammer of Monsanto, their own scientists repeatedly warned that GM foods might create unpredictable and hard-to-detect side effects, such as increasing food allergies, a buildup of toxins in the body, newly emerging diseases and conditions, a worsening of existing diseases and syndromes, nutritional problems, and serious digestive disorders such as leaky gut syndrome, a precursor to celiac and other digestive disorders. Yet, even as long-term safety studies of GMO crops were being called for by the FDA, reports of their detrimental impacts were already flooding in. In India, thousands of sheep, buffalo, and goats died after grazing on Roundup Ready BT cotton plants. Mice that ate GM corn had fewer and smaller babies and exhibited signs of aggression, confusion, and unsocial behavior, the same behaviors found in the human disease autism. Additional studies demonstrated that more than half of the babies born to mother rats that were fed GM soy died within 3 weeks. Hamsters that were fed GM soy lost the ability to have babies by the 3rd generation. Rodents fed GM corn and soy showed immune system dysfunction and signs of toxicity. The stomach lining of rats fed GM potatoes showed excessive cell growth, a condition that may lead to cancer. One study on animals that ate GM food found that they developed organ lesions, altered liver and pancreas cells, changed enzyme levels, and many other disturbing effects. All these studies and more were done in the early GMO years. Even the American Academy of Environmental Medicine (AAM) reports, several animal studies indicate serious health risks associated with GM food consumption, including infertility, immune dysregulation, accelerated aging, dysregulation of genes associated with cholesterol synthesis, insulin regulation, cell signaling and protein formation, and changes in the liver, kidney, spleen, and gastrointestinal system. The AAEM was so disturbed by their studies that they took an important and historically significant stand by asking physicians to advise their patients to avoid GM foods. It is quite apparent that there is more than a casual association between GM foods and adverse health effects. Increasingly, genetically modified foods are being blamed for sudden increases in incidences of autism and Alzheimer's disease in areas where they were recently introduced into the food system. In the UK, soy allergies skyrocketed by 50% soon after GM soy was introduced. And for those who are allergic to soy, you should know that cooked GM soy protein contains as much as 7 times the amount of known allergens as compared to non-GM soy. In the early GMO years, these franken-food murderers were promising to feed the world while at the same time twisting the arms of any farmer who resisted planting their seed. And any truly independent researcher daring to investigate or study the claims made by one of these big 6 franken-food companies was quashed as ruthlessly and effectively as an insect doused with Monsanto's DDT. Despite their ruthless tactics, many truly independent studies were able to be conducted outside of the long reach of Monsanto and friends, and they turned up some truly frightening results. In September of 2012, a 2-year peer-reviewed study on the effects of feeding Monsanto's NK603 GMO Roundup Ready corn to rats and exposing them to exceedingly low levels of Roundup herbicide were published by researchers at Caen University in France. Their findings found seriously alarming results that indicated the dangers of GM food, feed, and their associated herbicides. The study was based on the same exact protocols Monsanto had used in 2004 to prove that their corn was safe for consumption. But the scientists in the Caen study increased the length of the research period from Monsanto's paltry 90-day study to a more revealing 2-year study. The Caen scientists also wanted more documentation as to the effects of their study, so they not only increased the number of animals tested, it was already the largest animal study of its kind, but increased the frequency of testing and the number of factors that would be tested for. Researchers tested for 3 doses, rather than 2 in the usual 90-day-long protocols, of the Roundup-tolerant NK603 GMO maize alone, the GMO maize treated with Roundup, and Roundup alone at very low environmentally relevant doses, starting below the range of levels permitted by regulatory authorities in drinking water and in GM feed. What they found was nothing short of horrific. It took only 4 months, 8 weeks more than the Monsanto-led study, for the research team to begin seeing the negative physical effects. The Caen study rats developed 400 times the number of large tumors and died 2 3 times more often and faster than the control group. They had increased mammary tumors, affected pituitary glands, and congestion and necrosis of the liver. Researchers also found that exceedingly low doses of Roundup disrupted estrogen and androgen receptors in cells and acted as a sexual endocrine disruptor in live animals. According to the study, by the beginning of the 24th month, 50–80% of female animals had developed tumors in all treated groups, with up to 3 tumors per animal, whereas only 30% of controls non-GMO fed were affected. The Roundup treatment groups showed the greatest rates of tumor incidence, with 80% of animals affected with up to 3 tumors for 1 female in each group. Read that again very slowly, and imagine that we humans are the rats. An earlier study conducted in 2011 entitled Maternal and Fetal Exposure to Pesticides Associated to Genetically Modified Foods in Eastern Townships of Quebec, led by Aziz Aris and Samuel LeBlanc, and published in the journal Reproductive Toxicology, found Bt toxin and the herbicides glyphosate and glufosinate in nearly 100% of pregnant and non-pregnant women and their unborn babies. And a more recent study of randomly selected participants from around the country had glyphosate, Roundup, in their blood and urine. A few years ago, I might have said to you that only certified organic foods do not contain genetically modified organisms. But I can't say that anymore. That's because we know that GMO plants often have an increased ability to cross-pollinate with their open-pollinated and heirloom counterparts, like corn. In one early and devastating experiment that took place in 1998, University of Chicago scientists were working on genetically modifying a variety of mustard to be herbicide-resistant. And while no known gene affecting floral characteristics was altered in the experiment, the researchers noticed that the flowers from the genetically modified mustard looked different than those on the unaltered mustard. Even though the scientists thought this change was unlikely to be significant, they decided to test the modified plant's outcrossing rate, which essentially tests the speed and effectiveness of pollen moving from the male flower to the female flower in order to produce viable seed. It turned out that the genetically engineered mustard had over 20 times the outcrossing rate of the standard mustard. In other words, the pollen from the GMO mustard was more than 20 times more likely to successfully reproduce than its natural counterpart in the same scenario. This disturbing fact spells disaster for non-GMO crops grown in the same region as open-pollinated and organic crops, and its outcome has already been felt by farmers all over the Midwest. Today, any and all non-GM open-pollinated heirloom plants are in real danger of being contaminated by their frankenfood counterparts. This includes natural hybrids, which are simply a cross of 2 varieties of a similar species, heirlooms and open-pollinated vegetables in your garden, as well as seed, grain, cereal, and fruit crops being grown in commercial and organic fields. And once a non-GMO plant is infected with the patented DNA of a GMO, it is essentially illegal to grow it or save its seed without obtaining legal permission from the patent owner first. Additionally, multinational corporations like Monsanto are working hard to buy up as many small seed companies as they can in order to gain control of yet more genetic material for their freakish food experiments. Worse yet, our government has full and complete awareness of the dangers lurking in our food and is doing absolutely nothing to stop it. In fact, many former Monsanto employees now work in positions of power at the FDA and other regulatory agencies that are supposed to monitor the safety of the American food supply. They have the power to approve or deny crops introduced by biotech giants like Monsanto, but they choose to climb the ladder of power and enrich themselves and their evil friends rather than save lives. Even if you have a moral opposition to GMOs, you are probably eating them right now and don't even know it. That's because there is no law that requires GMO foods and ingredients to be labeled or identified as such. If the laughable labeling bill that was passed a couple of years ago ever goes into effect, there won't be a single word about GMOs on them. Once again, the onus will be placed on the consumer, who will need to locate and scan a QR code for every single product they want to buy just to find out if they contain GMOs or not. The big argument from the GMO herd is that labeling costs too much. Sob. But if the labels have to be changed anyway to include the QR code, why not just print the warning, "This product contains GMOs," and be done with it? Because they know that no one wants to eat frankenfood, that's why. The GMO labeling bill also has the organic industry nervous. Democratic Senator John Tester told reporters, "The bill uses a new definition of bioengineering, and because USDA is given the authority to determine which foods are considered bioengineered, there could ultimately be a situation where a GMO seed is planted, raised using organic processes, and then certified organic despite it being a GMO plant." In July 2018, the Organic Trade Association was called to task for accepting the membership of chemical giant BASF, maker of the deadly dicamba herbicide, and other non-organic corporate entities and growing modalities like hydroponics. As the purveyors of chemical and genetic farming worm their way into the lucrative organic market, we may soon see organic food being grown with GMO franken seeds and their associated petrochemicals. The ruthless and willful contamination of the world's food supply by invasive and irreversible genetic material is the greatest silent disaster in human history. There is absolutely no way to stop the spread of GMOs into our food system, and there is no known way to reverse the contamination once it has occurred. The first solution to this disaster is to educate yourself as to what kinds of GMO ingredients are in the food you buy, which is pretty much everything. Then grill your supermarket manager and local, state, and federal politicians about their stance on GMOs and labeling, and boycott all GMO foods. If no one buys them, they'll stop growing them. Better yet, grow and raise as much of your own organic food and seed and animal feed as possible, or buy it directly from a local farmer who does.